Welcome to the show. Picture a vulnerability inside a major bank's software stack being found and exploited in minutes, while the bank's patch cycle still runs 60 to 90 days. That's the world behind today's episode, the Mythos Awakening, why this AI is very different. If this conversation helps you make sense of where AI is heading, please like, share, and subscribe to the Human Workforce Podcast. I'm Simon Carver, joined by Lachlan Reed, CJ Murphy, and Jack Burns. And gentlemen, this one doesn't feel like another story about efficiency. It feels like the front door just came off the hinges.
Yeah, mate, that's exactly it. For ages, we've talked about AI like it's a faster intern or a sharper spreadsheet with attitude. Mythos isn't that. It doesn't sit there waiting for a prompt like a polite tradie at the gate. It behaves more like an adversary, casing the street, checking every window, every weak lock, every little gap under the roller door. That's what makes the hairs on the back of your neck stand up.
Let's talk about what's actually happening. Ordinary automation follows instruction. Mythos class capability appears dangerous because it can identify weakness, test it, adapt, and then weaponize what it finds. The real question isn't whether it can write code. Plenty of systems can write code. The question is whether it can think through a system the way an attacker would. Once you have that, you move from assistance to active threat discovery at machine speed.
And speed is not a secondary variable here. It changes the meaning of the entire system. A defense that works in a world of human-paced attackers may fail completely in a world of machine-paced intrusion. If the interval between discovery and exploitation collapses from months to minutes, then many existing controls are not weakened, they are functionally obsolete.
Wait, functionally obsolete is the phrase that's sticking with me? You're not saying the firewall disappears. You're saying the timing assumptions behind it disappear.
Exactly. Most cybersecurity architecture is built on delay. Detect, investigate, patch, recover. Remove the delay and you remove the breathing room those systems depend on. People hear AI in cybersecurity and imagine a faster alarm. The more serious issue is an attacker that can rewrite the tempo of the whole engagement.
So it's not just this thing is smart, it's this thing makes our slow bits deadly. That's the bit that gets me. Even a solid company with decent people, decent tools, decent process, they can still get caught flat-footed because the old timeline's gone walkabout.
And we've seen this pattern before with technology shifts, but not at this velocity. The narrative around AI has mostly been productivity, workplace change, maybe job displacement. This is different. This is AI altering the balance of power in cybersecurity, and by extension, global stability. Once a system can autonomously search for exploitable conditions across large attack surfaces, what can AI do for us becomes, what can AI do to us? That's not hype, that's a reframing.
And it's the kind of reframing that lands in very human places. Your bank account, your health records, your identity. Not abstract, personal.
Here's the core mechanic. We're talking about zero-day exploits, vulnerabilities nobody knows exist yet. Historically, finding and exploiting those took elite teams, serious time, sometimes months, sometimes years. Mythos compresses that. If discovery happens in minutes and exploitation follows immediately, you create what security people sometimes describe as a kill zone. The gap between the moment a weakness is found and the moment defenders can respond.
And that 60 to 90-day patch gap? That's the number I can't shake. 60 to 90 days on the corporate side versus minutes on the attack side. That's not a race. That's like turning up to Bathurst on a push bike, mate.
Right. And once that asymmetry becomes normal, the advantage shifts decisively toward offense. We tend to assume software locks are secure until proven otherwise. But if the lock can be picked almost instantly after a flaw is found, then trust in digital systems starts to erode at the foundation.
The chained vulnerability is the more serious part. Interconnected systems were built for efficiency. Banks connect to payment rails. Hospitals connect to records and billing systems. Telecoms carry the signaling layer for everything else. Identity services sit underneath all of it. If Mythos can move through one weak link into adjacent systems, then the risk is not one breach, it is cascade.
Cascade is the word, isn't it? Because the moment you said telecoms and identity in the same breath, I stopped thinking about a hacked password and started thinking about a neighborhood blackout that also locks people out of money and medical access. That's not a thriller plot. That's Tuesday if this goes wrong.
Correct. Infrastructure risk is rarely cinematic. In real life, it is administrative. Payment failures, record corruption, authentication breakdown, communications latency. The danger is not only dramatic collapse, it is sustained disorder across systems ordinary people rely on every hour.
And the folks in suits know it. When you've got emergency meetings, closed-door briefings, and names like Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent and Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell pulling in the largest banks for urgent discussions, well, that's not a cheeky panel chat at a tech conference. That's the grown-ups hearing the smoke alarm.
I keep coming back to those bank briefings because once Wall Street and Washington react in real time, the conversation has already moved from innovation to containment. CJ, is that too strong?
No, I think that's exactly right. We've crossed into national security territory. When financial institutions begin preparing for automated cyber espionage at scale, thousands of simultaneous breaches, no fatigue, no human bottleneck. You're no longer talking about isolated incidents. You're talking about persistent, adaptive intrusion with geopolitical implications.
And this is where skepticism matters. People often assume sophistication guarantees control. It does not. A capable model in the wrong hands, state-sponsored actor, organized criminal network, well-funded proxy, does not need perfect success. It needs enough success, often enough, across connected systems. That threshold is much lower than most people think.
So defense has to get a wriggle on. That's why things like Project Glasswing matter. Banks are basically saying, fine, we'll use AI to attack ourselves before someone else does. It's a weird shift, but a sensible one. Automated patching, AI-driven monitoring, continuous testing, all of that is about getting defenders operating at AI speed instead of human help desk speed.
Project Glasswing is such a telling name too. It sounds delicate, but the idea is brutal. Stress your own systems constantly. Find the crack before Mythos does. And then the sandbox piece, testing critical infrastructure in contained environments. That's like doing a fire drill in a building where the walls can rearrange themselves.
Yes, and underneath that response is something less flashy but more important: governance. The Frontier Safety Roadmap matters because it tries to define what responsible control looks like before a crisis makes the decision for us. 4 pillars stand out. AI safety levels, so you classify risk and apply containment accordingly. Model hardening, to reduce misuse and jailbreaks. Hardware controls, the physical off switch, which sounds blunt because it is. And deployment vetting, so high-capability systems only run in secure environments.
And even then, we should be honest about the limit of defense. Strong defenses may reduce damage. They may slow spread. They may improve recovery. They do not guarantee elimination of risk. That distinction matters. People are often comforted by the existence of a framework. A framework is not safety. It is disciplined preparation under uncertainty.
That's a hard pill, hey. You're saying even if we do the smart stuff, hardening, monitoring, off switches, vetting, we might still only be trimming the blast radius.
Yes, and trimming the blast radius is worthwhile. In engineering, preventing total failure is often the first victory. But we should not confuse resilience with invulnerability.
That sounds efficient, but at what cost if we ignore the human layer? Organizations need tools, yes, but they also need judgment. Leaders have to understand what they're deploying, where, and why. Businesses should assume the environment has changed. If your defenses operate at human speed alone, You are exposed by design.
So let's make this practical. For organizations, automated patching, AI-driven monitoring, continuous testing, and serious sandbox work for critical systems. For governments, reporting requirements, containment environments, hardware and deployment controls. For individuals, this gets boring in the best possible way. Multi-factor authentication, hardware security keys, layered identity protection. Not sexy, very useful.
Yeah, the humble basics still matter. Bit like wearing a helmet on the trail bike. Doesn't make you invincible. Does stop one stupid moment becoming the whole story.
And maybe that's the human point to end on. Vigilance isn't paranoia. Resilience isn't fear. It's just accepting that the environment changed and choosing not to drift through it asleep. If you found this valuable, like, subscribe, and share the Human Workforce podcast with someone who needs a clearer signal in all this noise.
Stay thoughtful.
Stay disciplined.
Stay sharp, mates.
And stay human.